Hey guys, coming at you from, it's such a hot day today. It's 38 here in where I live in Canada, which is, it's got to be right around 100. I believe 38 Celsius is 100 Fahrenheit, or maybe 101. So it's hot here. I'm actually going to take a tech break for a couple days. I got my Beastie Boys in the background. Let's turn it down here a little bit. Because I think, at least for me personally, it just helps me to unplug every once in a while and just detach, because I love working, I love helping people, I love helping my social media clients and coaching and doing all the things I'm doing. But I am a mom, and I need to always tend to my self-care, because otherwise I can get out of balance. So this is my last video I'm going to make for a few days at least. And I wanted to talk about, again, I sometimes play devil's advocate, because I think it actually can be really important to do in this community. And I want to challenge the narrative again, because, okay, so how do I even break this down? When we talk about brain damage, and this terminology gets brought up quite a bit in the community, and I want to challenge that, because I have never seen definitive proof from any client, and I've talked to clients with absolutely every test imaginable done, and I've never seen anything that indicates brain damage. And that doesn't mean that there's not a possibility that there could be. But even when I think about things like multiple sclerosis, some of the other more known nervous system disorders, typically in an MRI, things will show up. Lesions, you can have a spinal tap done and something will show up. Whereas in this situation, nothing ever shows up, ever. And if there is something small, like say someone gets other types of tests done, mineral analysis, I mean, there's a million tests you can get done, and there might be deficiencies that show up, but nothing specific to the brain that I've ever seen. And again, I'm not saying that's definitive proof that there's no brain damage, but I also want to challenge the narrative that this is for sure brain damage. And the reason why is because, again, I feel like with the wealth of information that we have nowadays, not just in the withdrawal community, but just in general, we're all hyper-connected on our phones, social media, and absolutely anybody can post on any forum, anywhere, or any platform. And so we're just inundated with this information constantly. It's become so overwhelming that it's become difficult to decipher truth from fiction, opinion from fact. And it's hard, and I've noticed that even just in general, outside of this community, people are disconnected from their intuition. And I always speak in generalizations, and it doesn't apply to everybody, and you know the drill. I feel like I just am a broken record when I say that, but truly, nothing applies to everybody in every situation. I like to just challenge things, and when I approach most topics in life, this could be anything, because of the overwhelm of information that we are exposed to every day, I try to break it down very simplistically and approach it with simple logic and maybe how a 5-year-old might view it, or someone with no access to the internet, as I've said in other videos. And the problem I have with the brain damage theory is because, and I've spoken about this before, I have worked with people who have marked brain injuries, who are born very disabled, who have structural brain injuries. The whole gamut of brain injuries, things that are structural, things that will actually never change. And the problem I had, and the thing that I noticed, and because I was a group home manager for years, those things don't take vacations. So the fact that we talk in windows and waves, and the fact that we get breaks sometimes from symptoms, not everybody, but the vast majority of people, that to me is not consistent with brain damage. Now, I get that there are functional brain changes, but I think calling it brain damage is inaccurate. And brain function changes is more in line with what I believe is going on here. And I don't believe it's permanent, because again, and I feel like no matter how I word this, people can come back at me and say you're gaslighting and you're not speaking for the people who are protracted. I'm just challenging the thought process, because again, every day when I talk to people, there is so much coming through in the conversation about the fear. The level of fear is just, and yes, you have a compromised brain when you're in acute withdrawal. Your stress response is turned on and it's staying on, which is unnatural. The nervous system is supposed to like respond to stress acutely and then dial down again. And in our situations, it doesn't. And so is it really receptor damage? Is it really up or down regulation of receptors that need to upregulate? Because how do you explain someone who has taken a drug for years, decades, and has the exact same symptoms coming off a drug as someone who takes 1 dose or 3 doses? If you watched my video 2 days ago, I think I talked about like my bucket theory and how there are things that sort of assault the nervous system, for lack of a better word, and it just takes it has to get full enough that something triggers it to spill over. And if you parallel this into other things like I've talked about, autoimmunity and different chronic diseases, there is often a buildup. It's not usually the case where someone is perfectly healthy. It might be, but not from what I've seen. Or maybe they're healthy, but they have loads of stress. And this can be, there's different categories of stressors. There's emotional and psychological stress, but there's also chemical stress. There's also physical stress. There's things like accidents and toxins, and there's inflammation, and there's so many things that like assault the body. And again, the receptor theory just does not make sense, at least in whole. It doesn't explain the whole picture. And I am a believer in multifactorial. Complex chronic conditions typically are multifactorial. Yes, in every situation of people that I talk to, the drugs are the problem, but are they the only problem, or were they just the final trigger? That's what I'm wondering, because again, why are the vast majority of people, or even let's just say half of people, aren't affected at all by withdrawal? Does that mean that their receptors weren't affected? Is it genetic? How do people recover? Again, playing devil's advocate, if it's brain injury or brain damage, that doesn't take a vacation. If it's functional changes, that might explain it. But if it's receptor damage, why is there such a wide range of healing times? That doesn't really make sense. Why can someone be recovered and then just a panic attack or severe stress will put them back into what feels like acute? Were the receptors re-damaged, or were they just sensitized? But we don't talk like that. We talk about receptor damage. We talk about down and up regulation. But what if we do something that doesn't affect GABA or serotonin or whatever, but that's still spilling us back into symptoms? I just don't believe that it's that simple, personally. I think it's a building up of things that are hitting the nervous system and hitting the nervous system. And as these things are piling up, our stress tolerance is going down and our symptoms are going up. Because again, if you just join a Reddit or you join a Facebook group with any of these other chronic conditions that I've listed in many other videos, long COVID, ME, CFS, MCAS, chronic Lyme disease, why are people presenting so similarly, having the same sensitivities, the same triggers, windows and waves patterns? Why are they getting neurological things like inner vibrations? Are all these things receptor damage? Are they all from inflammation? Are they all a buildup of things assaulting the nervous system with a spilling over effect? What is it? Why can some people get sick from COVID and be fine, and other people, even if they had mild COVID, then go on to have long COVID? Why? And why can some people have severe presentation of acute COVID and then be fine in a week or 2 weeks or a month? Why is it? And I feel like, again, if we go down to the nitty gritties of, it's the spike protein with COVID, it's the Bartonella and spirochetes bacteria in Lyme disease, it's the receptors in withdrawal. Does that really fit? Does that explain how these syndromes are so similar even though some of the people in these groups have never touched a psychiatric drug? Why are they describing what we call akathisia, but they're calling it something else? But they're describing pacing, can't sit down, chronic panic, but theirs was triggered by long COVID. Did their receptors get damaged? I don't know. I'm not saying I have the answers. I'm just questioning the thought processes. I'm just challenging the narrative, because again, and I've talked about this before, a lot of people who have recovered from any of these chronic conditions I just listed, there are so many people that will talk about addressing the limbic dysfunction. And again, people will say, you're just gaslighting, you're just saying it's all in our heads. It's not. It's trapped in your nervous system. It's essentially like a trauma response. And I don't know the exact physiology, I'm not claiming to, but it's what makes more sense to me than some of these other theories. Let me know your thoughts on that. And oh, I gotta go. Okay, so I'm gonna have to splice these videos together because I had to stop before, and now I'm gonna just finish off what I was saying. And I find it so interesting how, whether it's withdrawal or whether it's one of the other conditions that I mentioned, that a lot of people find recovery in brain retraining. And I just find that fascinating because, again, are you repairing the receptors by doing that? Or is it different? Is it a different mechanism that's keeping people stuck? It's just food for thought. And this is based on a discussion I had today with someone who's wonderful. And she's someone that I actually coached back in the day, when I first started coaching. She was one of the first people that I talked to. She was in very bad shape. She had a complex drug history, severe symptoms, has had akathisia and had long COVID, and has done reinstatements, taken multiple classes of drugs. She was not really functioning, and I hadn't talked to her in several months, and I reached out to her just to see how she was doing. And she's like, I've learned so much and I want to chat with you. And so we just had a call today, and I couldn't believe how different she sounded. Just totally different, laughing, upbeat, bubbly. I mean, she was like the worst situation that you can be in from these drugs she was in. And the way that she got well, and she's still in the process of recovering, but she's living her life, and she is, in her own words, 50% better, which might not sound like a lot, or it might sound like a lot, but she's on her way to full recovery after suffering for a long time. And because she had a history years ago of akathisia, pacing akathisia, so she has a long story. And what got her to feeling so much better and gaining her functionality back was doing brain retraining and re-engaging in life, disengaging from the community as much as possible. And she was someone who was heavily involved, and learning about how limbic dysfunction happens and how we get stuck in loops has really been helpful for her. And it's not a panacea. It's not something this is just going to fix all of your problems. And again, this is a complex disorder, dysfunction, whatever. But I don't think you can really, and I've heard this story many times, and not everybody gets to the end point. I'm not saying DNRS is the magic bullet. Other people that I've talked to who have recovered, it's different versions of the same thing. It's getting that brain, that primitive fight or flight response dampened down, because that is what is ultimately producing all of the symptoms. And like I said, different people have come to that in different ways. And this is why I've talked about in videos, putting the cart before the horse. There is a level of neuronal healing, I do believe, especially in acute. But once things just drag on and on and on, I think it's important to at least explore other things. I've also made videos about mitochondrial dysfunction, and where that comes from is people who have vestibular issues from these drugs, if that's their primary problem, and they don't quite know what's going on, if they haven't connected it to the drugs, they'll go to vestibular doctors, physiotherapists, and if that person is saying, well, this is probably an inner ear problem, it's not really getting them very far. And if the person suggests that it's a brain problem, it can lead people to freaking out. But ultimately, all of these things are a brain problem. Something is stuck on in the brain. And same with tinnitus. Right away you get tinnitus, you go to an ENT, you have audiograms, and really it's originating from the brain. From everything that I've learned, maybe in some cases it's in the ear, but when I talked about this in a prior video, I believe that mitochondrial dysfunction could be a part of withdrawal and its associated symptoms, because I've talked about the tinnitus course that I took, and he clusters together tinnitus, hyperacusis, vertigo, visual snow, Meniere's disease, and there's something else. And he believes that the root cause of it is mitochondrial dysfunction, regardless of how you got tinnitus, as far as like whether it was noise trauma, pregnancy, stress, autotoxic medications, whatever. He believes that that's the underlying mechanism. And he has tons of testimonials of people getting better using his methods, which address mitochondrial dysfunction. I've done that myself, and my tinnitus is 98% gone. So I do believe there's something to that as well. And so the more things you can kind of use to tackle this beast, the better. So that's why I talk about these different topics in videos. Again, I do believe these are complex problems, and there's not a one magic bullet or easy solution that works for everybody. But that is the purpose of this channel, is to talk about the stories that I see, the people I talk to. I'm actually going to do an interview finally on my channel. I've been wanting to do it for a long time, but it just hasn't worked out with the people that have wanted to come on, and then they change their minds. So that's going to be happening. So I'd like to do more videos about that. So stay tuned, and yeah, I hope everybody's doing okay, and let me know your thoughts on this. And again, I just like to challenge things, and I have talked to other people, and even myself, once I started to disengage. And I'm not talking about when you have really positive supports and encouraging people you've met in this process. It's more when you're constantly exposing yourself to the horror stories that really sinks in to an already compromised brain. And so being mindful of that is very important, because again, on the flip side of that, when you have a conversation, sorry, I'm trying to get my seatbelt on. When you have a conversation with someone, you provide them hope and support. It's amazing how their symptoms will dial down right in front of your eyes. I mean, you're not influencing the receptors per se, like you're not healing them in that moment. Something else is happening. You're calming down the very, very highly dysfunctional stress response, in my opinion. And again, too, what was I going to say? It was something about the tinnitus thing. When people address these other causes, they get better. And again, it's not straight across the board. I feel like I say that over and over and over again. But all of these symptoms are related, yet they present differently in different people. Like some people get the vestibular, some people get tinnitus, a lot of people get many symptoms, but how we address it and potentially try to help it along is different, and it's often multifaceted. So I'll just leave it at that. I gotta run and grab some supper. So I'll talk to you guys later. This is what I was going to say, and I'll have to add this on to the video. When I was just talking about tinnitus at the end there, the main theory about what causes tinnitus is broken stereocilia in the ear, which is like those hairy projections. And the theory is that those get broken. And so the guy who has all these successes in helping people turn tinnitus around, including myself, he's like, did we just repair the stereocilia, or was it never broken in the first place? Or was it not the cause? Even if it was broken, is that not the cause of tinnitus? So I kind of approached this the same way. So I just wanted to add that in.